is the internet some kind of the printing press of the 21st century?
Pretty obviously, yes. I mean, it is a big shift. It's as big a shift as the printing press. The telegraph was quite a big deal in the 19th century, but what this does, oddly enough though, I think, is it takes us back to an era quite similar to the era of the printing press. That sounds paradoxical in some ways, but what the printing press did was it allowed lots of people to distribute information more easily than they could. And, you know, the obvious examples are that the announcement, Columbus's letter when he comes back from the New World, spreads across Europe incredibly fast. It's basically copied, reprinted, new versions are translated. You know, it spreads very quickly. And if you look at what happens with Luther and the pamphlets that he writes and the arguments at the beginning of the Reformation, it's very much like blogging. Luther was somebody who, if somebody wrote a pamphlet against him, he couldn't leave it alone. He had to reply. And we all know people like that on the internet today. So there was this sudden ability to communicate in ways that the church couldn't stop, that the state couldn't stop. And we see this over the next centuries. You get the coffee house culture in London. You get the emergence of new forms of journalism. You get the actual origin of the newspaper, and so on. And then what happens in the 19th century is that the technologies of mass dissemination come along. You get the telegraph, the steam press, and then radio and television. And it really centralizes the way in which information is distributed. And what I think is interesting about the internet is we're sort of going back to a pre-1850 situation where it's much easier for people to talk to each other, and the efficiency with which we can talk to each other is just as good as the efficiency with which the elite can talk to the masses. So in that sense, I think it's a sort of quite similar revolution.
And what do you think is the challenge for journalists to handle with this new resolution?
Well, it's difficult because we have grown up in a world, and the media companies have grown up in a world where everything is very vertical. That we are the high priests, and we decide what's important, and we tell it to the reader. And that was how things have worked for basically 150 years. And there's been more and more concentration in that time. There are less diversity of sources and so forth. And so the difficulty now is that we are no longer in that position, that there are other sources you can get information. If we get something wrong, people will point it out. So this is scary for a lot of particularly older journalists. I think younger journalists have grown up with this and are used to the idea. They are happier to participate in discussions, to leave, when people leave comments. They appreciate that they don't have all the answers. But I was dealing the other day with quite a senior journalist at The Economist. He'd done a blog post for the first time. Somebody pointed out a mistake in it, and he said, "Help, the readers know more than I do." Well, they always did, but now the internet makes this visible. So we have to learn to live with that if we're older, and if we're younger, we've grown up used to it. But it's a different relationship between the journalists and the audience. They're the people formerly known as the audience.
And there's a big discussion about what medium does the better outcome. Is it the quality better in print, or is it better on the internet? What do you think?
I don't think that's I think that's like saying, are newspapers that begin with letters from A to M better than newspapers that begin with letters from N to Z? I mean, some of the stuff on the internet is great and some of it's terrible, and some of the stuff in print is great and some of it's terrible. So I don't think there's anything inherent in the medium that determines the quality. I think a lot of people would like to say, oh, the internet's trash and you can only trust print, but actually that's not true. And if you look at, say, Wikipedia, which is written by volunteers, it's basically as accurate as most printed media. It's not quite as accurate as the specialist media, the trade press or the scientific press, on those sorts of subjects it's not quite as good, but it's basically as good as the mainstream media. So I think this is a distinction without a difference.
Do you think that print journalism, in the sense of its words written on paper, will survive? Or will we read on the iPad in the
I think it will survive, and I think we're seeing a bifurcation. So if you look at what happens in books, we are seeing more and more e-books, but we're also seeing a higher attention being paid to the quality of the printed book, because when you give somebody a book for Christmas, you want it to be a nice book. So I think the same is, I think there will be some products that people really want to consume in print, really glossy fashion magazines. It's just not the same experience, and things like that. So I think print will hang on, and in fact, if you look at the history of media, it's very rare that a medium goes away. People said that radio would kill live music, and it didn't. People said that television would kill theatre. television was going to kill radio, etc., etc. These things never happen. Those old media mutate and they discover what they're best suited for, and that's going to be the case with print as well.
But the CD
Yes.
killed.
Oh yes, the CD killed vinyl. Yes, that's
Vinyl,
true.
yeah,
Yes,
vinyl.
yes. And cassettes. Yes.
Is paper perhaps the vinyl of the written word? And we have people who put fancy books in their rooms, but read their daily news.
Yes,
on
that's
screen.
true. That's true. Well, maybe that's. I mean, there are a couple of examples. The telegraph went away as well. I mean, the telephone did kill the telegraph, so it does happen. But I think that's just a technology that does, that does something much better. And the telegraph, of course, came back in the form of the internet. So yes, I suppose vinyl was replaced, but basically one kind of disc gave way to another kind of disc, and then that gave way to to downloads. The experience from the listener's point of view is that they push some button and some music comes out which they can listen to. So I think that's basically from their point of view, the reading experience is different. The reading experience of reading a book versus reading an electronic thing is still quite different. Maybe the technology will change, but I think for the time being there will be certain kinds of things that people will want to consume in print, and I think that's unlikely to go away. I mean, there'll be less of it, but I think they're still going to they're going to hang around for a while yet.
Does it even matter? Isn't it? Yeah, does it matter if I read good journalism on a
No, I don't
paper
think it does.
on a
I don't think
screen?
it does. So, I mean, our line at The Economist is we think that the reader should be able to decide how they consume the content. So if you're a subscriber to The Economist, you get the print edition in the mail, you get full access to the website, you get free access on the iPad and the iPhone and Android very soon. And it's up to you. So when you're on a cramped train, you can read on the iPhone like this with one hand when you couldn't get the magazine out of your bag or your iPad out of your bag. When you're driving or running, you can listen to it in the audio version. I mean, we say it's up to the reader to decide, and we want to be, available in all those formats so that they can make the choice that's right for them.
So what matters is
the quality of the journalism.
quality.
I think so. That's what it is. It's information that people value and are prepared to pay for. And if you provide that, then there's still a market.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.